Shabbat Shalom. This week our Torah portion is Balak, and Balak means to lay waste or the devastator. As we see, Balaam, who this portion is also about, means the destruction of the people. And Balaam surely was a devastator in the end of his story or this Torah portion. And our Torah portion is out of the book of Numbers, chapter 22, verse 2 through 25, verse 9. So we see in Numbers 22, verse 3, that Moab were suddenly in the same spirit that Pharaoh and the Egyptians earlier on possessed, being that they had seen that the Israelites were so numerous in number, telling the elders that this horde will lick clean all that is about us as an ox lips up the grass of the field. Now we clearly heard this same thing before, and we've seen this spirit in Exodus chapter 1 verse 5 through 13. Do you remember this? These are the names of the sons of Israel who came into Egypt or Mitzrayim with Jacob. Each man came with his household: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All told, there were 70 descendants of Yaakov, and Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph died, as did all his brothers and all the generation. The descendants of Israel were fruitful, increased abundantly, and multiplied, and grew very powerful. The land became filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who knew nothing about Joseph, but said to his people, "Look, the descendants of Israel have become a people too numerous and powerful for us. Come, let us use wisdom in dealing with them. Otherwise, they'll continue to multiply, and in the event of war, they might ally themselves with our enemies and fight against us and leave the land altogether." So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built for them. And Pharaoh had storage cities of Pithom and Ramses. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built for Pharaoh the storage cities of Pithom and Ramesses. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and expanded, until the Egyptians came to dread the people of Israel and worked them relentlessly, making their lives bitter with hard labor, digging clay, making bricks, all kinds of field work. And all this toil, they were showing absolutely no mercy. So you see, that same spirit that is going on now already happened with them in Egypt. Why? It's simply because the children of Israel were blessed by Yahweh, and it shows the fulfillment of his promise to Abraham that he gave in Genesis, or Bereshit chapter 15 verse 5, when Adonai brought Abraham outside and said, "Look now toward the sky and count the stars, if you are able to count them." And Adonai said to him, "Thus is thy seed." But just as the Egyptians, so too did the Midians want to prevent the children of Israel from taking over their possessions. But the Midians did it differently. Unlike the Egyptians, who dealt with the Israelites themselves, the Moabites tried to hire someone else to take care of the Israelites. And in this case, the Moabite king Balak tried to hire none other than Balaam. Now, let us discuss a little about who Balaam was. Now, you see, Balaam was a pagan diviner, and he was a diviner that was for hire. In no other words, if you paid him, he, Balaam, would inquire to any false god or fallen angel who you paid him to inquire to. So Balak sent his men, who too were also diviners, to hire Balaam to curse Israel. But as Balaam tried to reach Adonai, Adonai came to Balaam and told him not to curse his people Israel, for they are his Baruch, are blessed people. He also told Balaam not to go with them. So next, Balak's hire Then the first man returned to Balaam and offered him to be rewarded richly, and that the king Balak would do anything that Balaam asked of him, if only he would return and damn the children of Israel for him. Now, for those who do or cannot see that this and these men had the same evil spirit as the Egyptians in them, let me show you how. So the men during the first oracle of Balaam left without Balaam returning with them. And then the king had men return to Balaam, but this time they were higher men of the king, their king. Now, I ask you this, where have we heard or seen this before? That's right, Matthew 12, verse 43 to 45, as it says, when an unclean spirit comes out of a person, it travels through dry country seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says to itself, I will return to the house I left, back to Balaam. Now when it arrives, it finds the house standing empty, swept clean, and put in order. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other, so more spirits more evil than itself, and they come and live there, so that in the end, the person is worse off than he was before. And this is how it will be for this wicked generation, it says. Now, why did Yahweh have Balaam bless Israel instead of doing it himself? Well, the Atidus Yisrael says sometimes there's a denunciation against a blessing that comes from Shamayim, as Hosea 10 tries to prevent it from happening or taking place. So to protect it, Yahweh disguises it so that it could pass by Hosea 10 without him knowing, unbeknownst. Now, an example of this is the miracle of Purim that Adonai brought through Esther, whose name means none other than hidden. So Esther means hidden. Do you see this? Now get this. As it is rumored that she, Esther, was not the most beautiful, the woman that contended for queenship with the king, she would probably not have had struck or drawn Satan's attention on her. So all the factors would quietly lead to Yahweh's miracle blessing, manifesting past Satan. Now, how do we know that Balaam actually received prophecy from Yahweh? I'm going to show you and tell you how. Because he told Balaam's messengers to wait overnight, because he had to do nothing other than what? To dream to receive a word from Yahweh. As Adonai told Miriam and Aaron, I speak with a prophet in a dream. So Adonai saved the children of Israel on 2 occasions with his angel. Now the angel of Adonai and a donkey being right there as part of the blessing. Now intervening for us, one was with Yaakov, who if he had not been saved, his son Yisrael would never have been born along with his descendants. Now the children of Israel, this is the second account I will state to you. But let me actually go and state the first one for you. Actually, you know what? No, let me do the second one first, and then we'll do the first one. Because the first one had to do with the sacrifice of Abraham's son. But the second one is this one. In Numbers 22, verse 21, Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes of Moab. Now listen to Abraham's account in Genesis. Now in Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 22, verse 3, it says, so Abraham got up early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took with him 2 of his young men and his son Isaac. Now in Balaam's account, the angel of the Lord interceded on our account and told Balaam to state all that Adonai tells him to say. And that was to bless the children of Israel instead of cursing them to death. But now with Abraham's account in Genesis, the angel of the Lord appeared to Abraham just as he was about to what? To slay Isaac. But the angel of the Lord called Abraham from Shamayim, or heaven, and said, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear Yahweh, since you have not withheld your only son from me. So do you see how Yahweh still reminds us of all that he continues to do and has done for us? See, Abraham went with the donkey to obey Adonai, but Balaam went with his own selfish reason to go against Adonai. Now the reason Adonai became angry with Balaam for going was Adonai told him to go with them. Now etam is the word he used, and he used the Hebrew word for etam for with them. Now etam means go with a person on a path, but not with the same intent or the same destination. In other words, go with them, but not with their intentions. But in verse 21 of Numbers 22, we see that Balaam went with them. And the term used for with is im, which is opposed to etam. So he went with their same intentions. And Yahweh always knows our true heart's intentions. That is why Adonai was angry with Balaam. Now, as with the donkey that Balaam was riding on, it was the donkey who on 3 accounts saved Balaam's life and prevented him from 3 different obstacles. Now, we can see this as a blessing message for us who are Adonai's true followers. We can see clearly it is as Adonai is guiding us on the right spiritual path, and that it is in him who will put obstacles in our way to prevent us from making the wrong choices and decisions in this journey of life that we constantly go through, leading us to death of no life. Just remember that Adonai would never give us more than we can handle. Now in Numbers chapter 24 verse 3, the sages explain that Balaam was actually blind in one eye. They say that every human needs 2 eyes. One is to perceive the greatness of Yahweh, and the other is to behold our own humbleness and insignificance. See, Balaam knew in Numbers 24:16 the greatest and the greatness of Yahweh, but he could not see his own insignificance and was therefore arrogant, so he therefore must have been blind in one eye. Now, moving on in Numbers chapter 23, verse 1, Balaam next tells Balak to build 7 altars with 7 bulls and 7 rams. But now I ask you, where have we heard this exact altar set up before with the 7 bulls and rams? In Job chapter 46, it was Job chapter 42, verse 8, if I'm not mistaken, when Yahweh told Eliphaz the Temani and his 2 friends, because unlike my servant Job, you have not spoken rightly about me. So now get yourself 7 young bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering. Also, there were 7 altars total that Abraham and Yaakov built to Adonai. This is why Balaam said, I have set up the 7 altars instead of I set up 7 altars. Now, Abraham built 4 altars total. One in Genesis chapter 12, verse 7. Second in Genesis chapter 12, verse 8. Third in Genesis chapter 13, verse 3 to 4. And fourth in Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 13, verse 17 to 18, on Mount Moriah. And Yaakov built 3 altars total to Adonai. And now Balaam spoke words blessing Israel instead of cursing them during his second oracle. So by now, Balak the Moabite king was upset that Balaam blessed them instead of cursing the children of Israel. So now at this point, Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor, or else at the lookout point. Now let us pause a little right there. Let me now ask you, where have we seen this happen in the Bible again? In Matthew chapter 4, verse 8. If you said that, then you are right on. You see, just as this is Balaam's 3rd oracle, get this, so too was this Satan's 3rd test for Yeshua, our Messiah. And once more, the adversary, Satan, took Yeshua up to the summit on a very high mountain and showed all the kingdoms of the world and all the glory, and tried to offer them to Yeshua if he would only bow down to Ha-Satan. But Yeshua did the opposite and rebuked him, just as Balaam did the opposite and once again blessed the children of Israel instead of cursing them as Balak requested. Now, in the last oracle, Balaam states that those who curse Israel would be cursed. And just as Balak tried to curse Israel, well, we know what that means. Read Numbers chapter 24, verse 17 to find out. See, what I love is the way that Yahweh had Balaam give us prophecies in his blessings, such as in Numbers chapter 24, verse 7, when he prophesied for Adonai about Israel's future king rising above Agag. And now Agag would later on be a king at no other time than the time of Saul. King Saul, as in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 8. But for all who thought that Balaam was to be true and loyal to Yahweh, well, I have to burst your bubble and tell you that the reason that in Numbers chapter 25, the children of Israel started profaning themselves by whoring with the Moabite woman was actually because Balaam's advice to the king Balak. His advice was the only way to have the children of Israel to defy Yahweh, and that was to have them seduced into sin, as Numbers 31 verse 16 tells us, when it states why these are the ones who, because of Balaam's advice, had caused the children of Israel to rebel, breaking faith with Adonai and the Peor incident, so that the plague broke out among Adonai's community. Now, in regards to Numbers chapter 24, verse 2, the Gemara, Bava Batra 60a, it explains this verse to mean that Balaam saw how the doors to Bnei Yisrael's tents did not face one another. Neighbors guaranteed each other's privacy by pitching the tents in such a way that avoided the possibility of peering into the neighbor's tents. So this tribe wouldn't look at this tribe's spouses and lust for them. Now, the Gemara states that they took precautions to safeguard against these illicit behavioral acts. The arrangement of Yisrael's tents helped ensure that husbands and wives would direct their emotions and their interest only towards their spouses, thereby preserving domestic stability. Now, Balaam, seeing this, with the wisdom that he was blessed with, knew that the children of Israel must have been having a struggle with adultery or lustful thoughts, to see that Yahweh Adonai gave them tent formations or sukkah instructions to prevent them from giving in the sins that would separate them from him. Now, the Talmud, Sanhedrin 106a, states that he, Balaam, thus said to him, Balak, the king, that Yahweh, the Yahweh of these, hates lewdness, and they are very partial to linen, as it states that they became accustomed to this linen while they were servants in Egypt and slaves in Egypt. Which, it dawns on me be very weird, because the generation that's over there, I don't even see how they could remember something from 40 years before when they've been in the wilderness with the clothes that they've had on. I mean, the only thing I could say is that Yahweh had them constantly remembering with the clothes that they were in as a remembrance, but they took it and they remembered it as the goodness, how they kept going back and forth arguing that we had so much goodness and great things happened to us while we were in Egypt with the food and everything else. But apparently that's what happened. They remembered these linens from there. It says after that, come and I will advise thee, erect for them. This is Balaam telling Balak about the situations that they can do to turn the children of Israel away from Yahweh. And he says, advise thee, erect for them tents enclosed by hangings, in which place harlots, old woman without young woman, but young woman will be within it, not on the outside. So when they appeared to, when they first walked by, they seen older women on the outside pitching to them to sell these linen garments. So he erected curtain tents from the snowy mountain of Hermon as far as Beth Ha Yeshemoth, or from the north to south which will be right from north to south, and place harlots in them, old woman without young woman within. And when an Israelite ate and drank and was merry and issued forth a stroll in the marketplace, the old woman would say to him, dost thou desire linen garments? The old woman offered it at its current value, but the younger woman, would offer it for less. And this happened on 2 or 3 times. And after that, he would say, the younger woman would say to him, thou art now like one of his family. Sit down and choose for thyself gourds of Ammonite wine, and lay near her. The young woman at the time. And at that time, he would. And he'd drink the wine with her that had been forbidden. And she would then say to him, would thou like to drink a glass of wine? Having drunk, his passion was inflamed, and he exclaimed to her, yield to me. Thereupon she brought forth an idol from her bosom and said to him, worship this. But I am a Jew, he protested. What does that concern thee? She rejoined. Nothing is required but that thou shalt uncover thyself. While he did not know that such was its worship, nay, she said, I will not leave thee ere thou hast denied the Torah of Moses thy teacher, as it is written. They went into Baal-peor and separated themselves unto the shame, and their abominations were according as they loved. Now, what is Baal-peor? Well, Baal-peor, it is personal defamation, such as defecating in front of this idol and exposing its rear tuchus to this idol. Now, Baal-peor is a public defamation, while Baal-tizephon is a service that you do in private between you and the idol. Now, the name Peor comes from Pa'ar, meaning open wide, to expose, to put it out there. Now, we can learn a very important lesson from this Torah portion. Just as the men return and constantly stir from the wickedness that these harlots had in mind for them, eventually the men, by putting themselves into temptation's way, they got lukewarm over time and got comfortable with these women to do as they said and to turn from being Kodesh to Adonai. So if you are infatuated by a coworker or such, you should avoid being with them in private without others in the room with you at any time, because the temptation will eventually take you over. Now, why can't you be in the room alone with them if you are a saved follower of Yeshua? And if you are secure in your faith? Well, let me say this. If you were so secure in your faith, the Ruach HaKodesh, or the Holy Spirit, would have never had you in the room with those intentions to lust after or with this person in the first place. So unless you could overcome it, it is possibly a test. And I ask you this, what would you do in this situation? Think about it. Now, I find it very ironic that in Numbers chapter 22, verse 31 to 33, that the angel of Adonai stated that he was going to kill Balaam with the sword. And now we see that later on, Balaam is impaled with a sword. So now for the Haftorah portion, we can see that Yahweh is pleading his case to the children of Israel. He is telling us that he is serious and that all evils, including magic and sorcery and fortune tellers and all other forms of evil arts, will be destroyed, and that pagan deity and images, all things that people idolize, will be destroyed, and that all that do not repent will be destroyed. But now, which is sad, is the fact that Yahweh has to take us to a spiritual court and to some degree present a spiritual lawsuit to the world, where he is calling the mountains into the court as witnesses, and he is pleading to us to know what he has done wrong to us. He is stating all the loving acts that he has done for us, including taking us from Egypt and having Balaam bless us rather than curse us. He is pleading to us to know what he has done wrong to us. Now, Samuel did the same thing in 1 Samuel 11:14 through 12:22. Now, all he requires of us in Micah 6, verse 8, in this Haftorah portion, is but one thing. Actually, you know what? It's not one thing. It's 1, 2, 3 things. So of 3 things, one is to do justice. 2 is to love kindness. 3 is to walk humbly with Yahweh, our creator, our master. So basically, in Micah, he took the 613 commandments and turned them into 3 basic principles, which we just explained. Now, the sages say that a person who is angry is as if he was worshiping idols, as it is written that a person who performs commandments for the sake of financial gain is as if he were worshiping money as an idol. Now, their idols would then be silver and gold. So I ask you today, do you have any idols? Now, last but surely not least, I would like to say that for our gospel portion in Mark chapter 11, verse 15 through 19, I believe personally that in churches today that Yeshua would flip over most tables in churches. And why, you're asking? Simply for this reason. Because I don't think that he wants people selling books and or CDs in his houses or places of worship. Besides, he said, as you have received the gospel freely, you too shall give it away freely. That is why we here at Follow Yeshua Ministries never charge for anything, but only give it in advice and commentary and everything we have away freely. We don't charge you for any of our books or items or anything that we put out there. If Yahweh gives us prophecies, visions, or anything, we will present it freely as we received it to the world. You're not supposed to charge for these things, or in other words, you're another Balaam, prophet for hire. Now, the lesson we can all take away from the withered fig tree in the gospel portion is that if we strive to grow in spiritual faith, then nothing would be impossible, and that we should forgive all of our brethren as we would want our Abba, our Father, Yahweh, to forgive us. Now, I want you to think about that this week, and let us close on that. And now, we will have the Aaronic blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. Shabbat shalom, everybody. This has been a weekly Messianic Torah portion from Following Yeshua Ministries. For more information or for help, please visit www.followyeshuanow.com.